All right, everybody. I am here. I say everybody like people are watching, but one day. I'm here with my friend Memes of Destruction, who I met from another person. And whenever you're ready to join us.
Though I know I should be wary, still I venture someplace scary.
Oh my God, he's got an intro.
I turn loose. Beetlejuice! Beetlejuice! Beetlejuice!
Oh my God!
You gotta let folks know what's going on as I'm shifting in and out of dragon form a little bit there. But hey guys, what's going on, dude? Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate your presence. The effort of shifting into human form must be difficult, though probably not for someone of your power level, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, one does not simply reveal one's full power level right off the bat. I mean, we learned this from Manaway a long time ago and everything. But Breath of Fire was one of my favorite role-playing games as well.
Oh, really? What is that? I thought that was, you look like a Yu-Gi-Oh person.
That is very true. But before there was Yu-Gi-Oh, there was also the Dragon Clan as well in the Breath of Fire universe as well, where basically the main protagonist ends up shifting into dragon form in various different forms over various different iterations. It's essentially kind of their standard archetypical story, yada yada, good, evil, this, that, and of course there's always complications with it as well, and you're like, it's not always straightforward who's good and who's bad, quote unquote.
That is that much like real life.
It's amazing how that works.
Yeah, unfortunate sometimes. Usually, I mean, it would be a lot easier if we lived in an anime. At least we would know where everyone stands.
Well, that actually goes back to Breath of Fire too. There was this item that basically, it wasn't even an item, it was something that was built in. So when you were chatting with other characters, it was supposed to allegedly, according to the strategy guides, tell you if they were lying or not. Now,
that's useful.
Well, the thing is, it always kind of bothered me because it didn't actually say that. But now that I think back to it, as perhaps an older, wiser memes in some ways, I think back is basically would just kind of change color and have a different chime. And in effect, I was kind of telling you what the person was feeling. So that was actually more descriptive in some ways.
Telling you what they were feeling or telling you that they were lying?
Yeah, just kind of giving you the gist of the idea. I realize I'm basing it off of like 20-year-old context that I have. And you not having any context whatsoever except for the words coming out of my mouth. So,
well, I mean, you're describing it rather well. Is it? I mean, you take it it's a good show?
It was a video game, but to be fair, I would have loved them to turn into a show. To be fair, they've come out with a new Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest, kind of like Dragon Quest like Die or something. And apparently it's supposed to be pretty good. I've yet to watch it.
Wait, you're talking about Dragon Quest, like the Dragon Quest? I've heard.
Oh yeah. The original like Dragon Warrior and everything. They came out with a new anime, and from what I've heard from some folks that are paying attention to that, it's supposed to be pretty good.
Well, we'll have to, I don't know, maybe check that out. So anyway, you have the name Memes of Destruction, but you're not particularly super hard in one direction. Is that true? You're kind of in the middle-ish, or you sort of go your own way as you describe yourself as a pathfinder?
As a pathfinder, yes, and I do appreciate you putting that in the title there. That is absolutely.
That's why I ask.
Well, that is absolutely amazing, because what's a pathfinder? My best explanation is a pathfinder. We're like Jedi. We just require more kyber crystals. The component goes into little lightsabers and everything like that. I did like that episode.
What do you do with your extra kyber crystals?
To be fair, I have never acquired any kyber crystals, so I could not say, and I'm also not a lightsaber engineer. So,
well, have you seen the video where the guy made a real one?
I have not. I now want to see it.
I'll show you it really quickly, like a quick little taste of it. There's a way to share my screen. Hold on, I'm going to. But yeah, it's really interesting. I'll show you. Well, maybe I'll just show you it real quick, and then I'll send you a link later.
Because I remember, I'm not sure if it was Neil deGrasse Tyson or who it was. They were talking about, in theory, creating an actual like plasma saber and the
Yeah.
tech and energy that would go into it.
Yeah,
like,
no, these people really made it.
Right.
It's real. It's 4,000 degrees, I think it said in the title. Yeah, they did it. It uses plasma. Yeah, it uses this stuff called laminar flow, which is really, yeah. So it really does that, and it can burn through stuff. I don't know if they show any of that in this video. I have it on mute too right now. But all right, hold on here. Here's Guinness World Records. Let's see, blah blah blah. Oh yeah, you can change the color too. You can
They made it actual plasma sabers.
Yeah, it's
freaking sweet.
Really cool. Yeah,
it's dangerous as hell, but that's freaking sweet.
Yeah, and it looks cool too. It's all not cyberpunk.
That's coming out very shortly.
Yeah, I can't wait. Speaking of cyberpunk, that's great. I was gonna say steampunk, the other one, the rival to cyberpunk.
That is amazing. I literally watched a video on Theory about like creating that like 4 or 5 months ago, and I'm like, dude, that's gonna be so far in the future and everything. And all of a sudden, I pop on here, and you're like, oh yeah, they made a lightsaber the other day. I'm like, what?
Like a metal wall and a door and everything. It's crazy. I'll like I said, I'll send it to you on Twitter or something. It's great. But anyway, so other than being like a Jedi, I mean, is that really the only difference that you prefer to have more kyber crystals than the average Jedi?
I mean, I do say that partially in jest as well, and that the Jedi actually have kyber crystals, but generally more of kind of like a lot of at least the ethos, the pathos of the Jedi, I do kind of agree with, in that I prefer being more of a peacekeeper and a seeker of a path forward there, and I don't really care what particular side might be up to quote unquote no good, and even no good a lot of times in reference, those folks think that they are doing something that is good, and why would I persecute for somebody for simply having a lack of information if I happen to have additional information, or maybe there's information I don't have that maybe I can learn from somebody else. I don't know. It's that whole you teach me and I teach you.
It sounds kind of like you're a bit of a fence sitter.
No. I've heard that. I mean, I also have used the term, and apologies for the harsh language I'm going to use, being at times a fascist pacifist. And
you're gonna have to elaborate that.
That term definitely requires explanation. And the reason why I say this is, number one,
not so much, honestly, hold on, I'm sorry, not so much because of the pacifist part. I can sort of reconcile that, though not completely. But so it is kind of an odd combination. But yeah, go on. Where did you get that from?
Well, at first, number one, if you spend enough time on the internet, at least in the current meta, there's a really good chance at some point somebody's going to call you a fascist. Doesn't matter what quote unquote side you're on, and using that as context as a prefix to actual pacifist, kind of like the whole quote unquote like Einstein, where it's like, all right, well, they want to be prime minister of Israel and everything. Oh, he was a pacifist and everything. Folks will say, oh, that would work, that wouldn't work, yeah, whatever. But the fact is, I would love to have unicorns and rainbows and basically everyone singing Kumbaya. I mean, that would be, I would like to strive. I would like to strive for something through that. However, in order to get there,
I don't think fascism is the way to do it.
No, I agree. The reason why I say it is, one, it kind of refers to the whole Ouroboros style, and that you're saying two of the most polar opposite things, gets people to say, huh, and the sheer fact that I also am a proponent of re-legalizing dueling. and the reason
that's a form of what?
The reason why I say this, it just again this, and it is more of an extreme solution. I would prefer that not to be the case, but the reason I put that mimetic out there is for the fact people to realize, because I've listened to some folks that are on further leftist streams as well as further rightist streams, and I have heard folks, again, this is a very anecdotal, but I have heard folks on quote unquote both sides literally expressing the wish to end other people that they disagree with. That bothers me. I see our fellow Americans literally being killed in the streets, and I sit back and say, okay, if this is a pressure cooker, if it's getting ready to pop, how do we add entropy into the system? And I'm like, you got consenting adults on both sides that want to literally engage in mortal combat. In the words of Dr. Serizawa from Godzilla, let them fight.
Oh my gosh, that's interesting. So you're like I don't want to fight, but if you guys want to fight, I'm not going to stop you.
I don't want so many of the good folks that fall within the very broad center going in whatever direction out to so many degrees getting caught up in it. And I'll give you a quick example of this. Like,
so you want us to just kill each other and then get it over with?
I want folks, if their hearts are full of hatred for one another, I want to give them the ability to potentially self-select, basically out of existence. That is what they want, because and also I thought this through a bit, and again, my personal opinion, I think it's a terrible idea, but the reason why I say this is because if you also believe in the concept of bodily autonomy, it's like, this is my body, this is my choice. We did have up for a referendum a number of years ago, like the Death with Dignity Act,
yeah,
and everything, and it didn't pass at the time. I did have some issues. Right? I did have some issues with the way that particular bill was worded there.
Oh, really? Can you like what?
There was no. You did not have to basically contact any of your family. That was ultimately the one thing within that bill there, and my concern was the legislation at the time. I swear I can speak. Basically, the way it was worded is, you may have some very dire diagnosis, and basically within the course of about 30 or so days, you did have several check-ins with the doctor. But I put myself in a position where, if I had a very bad diagnosis, and I was having like the worst month of my life, that I wouldn't even have to tell any of my family that I was basically going to choose to end my life. And that just, I do think life is precious, and that was just the one thing in there that just, I'm like,
well, why do you think people should be forced to tell people? I understand why most people would, but I'm not sure I would agree.
No, that, you bring up an extremely valid point, because also, if you are a consenting adult and everything, if it is your body, it is your choice. I'll also be straight up. At that time, I also did consider myself a bit more of a conservative in my nature as well. I also was probably watching a lot of Fox News and stuff at the time. Not that that would necessarily contribute to that, but I mean, that is one of those things. And
whatever we put in our heads.
I realize I literally jumped from dueling, and I'm slightly taking away from my own argument based upon my prior, or at least position at the time with that particular legislation. But I think this stuff is important. And you know what? If somebody does happen to change their mind on something, that's fine. Just explain it. Because if we hold our children to the standard of show your work or explain your work, I think we can hold our leaders to the same standard that we hold our children.
I sort of, I mean, but you can, I think if you're on the precipice of, you have a difficult diagnosis, you're in a lot of pain. I mean, I think the work is kind of just there, though, isn't it? Isn't it kind of already displayed out? I mean, maybe that's, you disagree.
And again, maybe I am misremembering. Maybe my position.
Well, if that is the position, it sounds like that's pretty clear. It just seems. I mean, is that the only thing that you would change?
I didn't like that, because I was looking at it through my personal lens, and I've had times in my life where I was really down and everything, and it's like, you know what? Maybe I don't necessarily want to be in this world and everything. And my fear was people might make a very harsh decision that they can't change.
Well, that is often true, that people consider suicide to be a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And there are a lot of people who choose not to commit suicide after thinking about it and then later deciding that that was the right thing to do. However, I do think it's a little different if you are on sort of a medical bed. And it's sort of like, it seems to me that those options really come into whether you're already going to die anyway. And that's just sort of, they're just keeping you alive as long as possible. But you're never going to go back to normal. Like, I mean, I'm assuming that if they believe that they can save you in any way, that while it might be an option, I don't think that they suggest it. I think that they say that you should probably hold on as long as you can to see if we can do something about it. Because I really do. I think it is more of just like, because it's different than when you're in a coma and someone else is choosing it for you. That's a little different.
Right.
However, I also don't necessarily think that that's a problem either if somebody's been in a coma for however long, especially in the fucking America where we don't have free medical care. So it's like that could be, it's like, oh, you stayed alive for years in a coma and you eventually came out, but now you have this medical bill that you'll never be able to pay, which hopefully is not something that happens too often, but is something that may come up. It's not directly related, but that sort of reminds me of that sort of thing that they have in some conservative states when it comes to abortion, where they allow it, but they have to see the fetus first or something like that, which is there's no medical purpose for it. It's just to try to dissuade them from doing so. How do you feel about that?
This is an extremely complicated issue.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be political, but honestly, philosophical is totally fine with me. I'm happy to go wherever we go.
This is one of those things, and my personal experience, basically having a situation where it's like, it takes two to tango. Mm-hmm. Certain people may have certain underlying assumptions before said tango, and then after the fact, you may be visiting a pharmacist or something. Mm-hmm. Hey, you know what? It does take two to tango. It's my choice. I should owe up for that.
So you're a pro-life person?
Pay for that. I ultimately come down on a woman's or a person's right to choose, because okay. It is bodily autonomy. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I also got to acknowledge I also got two cousins that were 3-month preemies and stuff. So this is my position. Do I like it, abortion? No. I tend to agree with President Obama is that it should be safe, legal, and rare. And if you can supplement that with proper education, prophylactics, and other things like that, that sounds like a pretty good place where a lot of folks could agree, so that we don't end up getting to that point. It's just my personal prerogative.
I totally agree. I think safe, legal, and rare is the thing. However, I also you said you're very similar to the Jedi beliefs, which is I assume you mean the Star Wars one. I believe there's a real religion called Jedi, but
it is legal. It is a recognized denomination in the United Kingdom, I believe.
Yeah, is that from Star Wars, or that's a?
I believe so. I think the way it worked is on the census you could fill in whatever religion you wanted, and they had so many folks end up reporting that they were Jedi, and that it is now in the census log that so many % of the UK population are classified as Jedi.
I'm gonna look it up. So I believe in reincarnation, and also the Jedi religion in Star Wars is based on Buddhism, but I don't know if they actually have reincarnation in Star Wars. But I personally believe in reincarnation. I think that it makes the most sense logically, considering the way things are. The way the universe works, the fact that we're made of, the universe. We are the universe. You can't be within. We
are the children of stars, man. It's like atoms, dust to dust. We all go back to the Earth's crust.
Okay, yeah. Jediism is based on the Star Wars, movies. So yeah. So, do you believe in reincarnation?
That's an incredibly interesting
question. Do you agree that we are children of the stars?
It all depends on kind of what you mean by reincarnation. If you're talking about the circle of life continues, it totally does. That's the thing. If we do break down to our elementary components, we go back to the earth, we are sustained from the earth. That is totally a form of reincarnation, if you would, or the circle of life. If as far as coming into other beings, ultimately, it almost seems like the difference in how you want to define it really comes down to the soul. And that's the thing.
You define as the soul.
Does one's essence of oneself, one's I don't know, life force, identity, something like that, transfer into new spirits? I have no freaking idea. I mean, I would love that to be the case. Do I have any evidence? Oh, hell no. But it's one of those things I don't know, but a lot of things kind of line up in some ways. I do see certain anecdotes. I mean, would it necessarily surprise me? I mean, not particularly. But at the same time, do I have any evidence to truly prove this, aside from some folks saying some stories and having some really bizarre coincidences in that, wow, they're describing exactly what this person basically told me like 60 or so years ago. It's like, that's kind of weird. I can't explain that. Maybe they just had a dream. Maybe it was just random. Maybe that person was that person in another multiverse. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the other thing, too. If the multiverse theory is true, then there probably is reincarnation, because I guess your molecules would reform again. I mean, that means that there's infinite versions of us right now as it is. Just every time, something happens on a quantum level and the universe splits and divides into a new one, then
that might explain a lot of dark energy.
Well, that's interesting.
Dude, that goes through my head once in a while. I'm like, wait a second. What if this was just the culmination of quote unquote souls or stuff over multiple universes, over a number of aeons and everything? And then my brain kind of breaks.
Well, it's funny that it's interesting you bring up energy, because so I imagine that you're kind of on the there's kind of a dualistic sort of view of the universe. Do you believe in there absolutely is good and evil, that it exists? I mean, obviously there's shades of gray in between, but do you believe that there is true evil and true good?
Again, that is a difficult one, and to be fair, I was a bit more skeptical. President Obama at one point during his presidency did say that he did believe evil existed. That did influence me. I tend to think, kind of like you were saying, it's like, is there good? Is there evil? Sure. Is there relativistic, depending on the individual, and shades of gray? Yes. I do believe that humanity, like many things, falls along a very broad spectrum, because I'll be straight up, just even in my own internal struggles and everything, just over the years, and I'll be straight up, dude. I'm bourgeois as F. I'm a trust fund kid, this and that. It's like, dude, full disclosure here. It's like, well, one, why would I run away from this? But at the same time, you got to accept, it's like, with great power comes a greater responsibility. I do say greater because maybe it was from the Spider-Man cartoon or something, or maybe I'm just remembering it that way. But
it was in the movie, certainly, but I think it's also from the comics.
Right. This is why I do think there is an additional onus on those of us may have additional means to help folks out, because all I know is that's what I would want if I was in a different situation. So it comes down to a lot of like the golden rule: do unto others as you would have do unto you. We say that all the time, or at least we used to, but how often do we ever just kind of like try to actually like do it in and of itself? I hear a lot of words come out of people's mouths, and their words and actions don't always kind of line up, if you kind of get what I'm saying there. And there's a number of reasons for that. And this is why generally, again, I say I'm a pathfinder. At the same time, I also said I'm kind of a liberal that believes in progress. So basically, you put a gun to my head, quote unquote. Again, we're not promoting any violence here, YouTube, but my gut reaction is, yeah, I'm a bit more of a lefty. That's where I tend to trend towards. And there are a number of reasons for that. It's like, well, again, it's like, for economic wise, I did go to business school. I did learn certain things. And if capitalism is one thing, it is a great way of accounting for wealth and ways to generate that. Now, I personally think you should have a certain level of a moralistic framework surrounding that as well, to make sure, because even quote unquote like absolute free capitalism, guess what? Supply and demand is the ultimate definer. And if you follow supply and demand as the ultimate definer, you're going to have a lot of consequences people have major issues with.
So yeah, capitalism is certainly a way of moving wealth around. However, it seems that it only, well, first of all, are you familiar with the actual difference between capitalism and socialism, and are you familiar with social democracy, the sort of halfway in between one?
I hear a lot of folks talk about it all the time, but I'm probably nowhere near as well versed as yourself. So if you could.
It's basically it's like socialized capitalism. It's capitalistic framework, but we have things like free healthcare and education and stuff like that. Like you can go as far as you want. It usually is mostly just they basically understand that it takes money to make money, which is I thought was like kind of a like foundational lesson to understand.
I believe in business school we can define that as quote unquote duh.
Yeah, right. It seems like that's like one of the day one lessons. So I would think that social democracy would be the way to go, but it basically, yeah. So it just sort of tries to keep people from getting to a point of absolute zero, basically, sort of, keeping people from destitution, which I think is a great start. I think that unfortunately, even within that framework, the difference between capitalism, socialism, and communism is capitalism is private ownership of the means of production, which, while your name is, in case anyone doesn't know what that is, it's the businesses, it's the coal mines, the factories, the companies, everything that sort of, makes, stuff that we, buy, sell, and move, but also things like, schools and everything, any sort of business or thing that operates as such. And under socialism, it's when the ownership of that is among the people who work for it. So if you worked at Starbucks, you would get a say in how Starbucks is run. Usually it would just be like a vote. Right now, under capitalism, it's the owners get to decide how it works. So the shareholders, basically, they get all the votes. You get the amount of votes equivalent to your share. So if you own half the company, then you get like half of the votes. So you could kind of decide where everything goes. And then communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless society where everybody owns everything. It's essentially anarchism, which is why I go with the term anarchist, because it has less of a stain on it from people who are countries that have claimed to be communist but have not actually done anything. In fact, they are what a lot of us on the left refer to as what's the word? Country. I can't think of the word, but it's state capitalism, where basically the whole country is run like a business. The instead of the ownership going to the workers and the people who do the business and the people, it actually goes to the government, and the government decides how everything goes. That's how China is, and it actually works pretty well for them. That's why they're building they've become such a strong economic power in the last 30, 40 years. And so it works efficiently, but it doesn't necessarily provide the best life for everyone in there. It basically just means that, like I said, the government owns everything. There's some private business within China, but yeah, you've got a fan in the comments. And yeah, it works like that. But anyway, so I like the idea of everybody owning everything. However, I don't think that that's an immediate thing that we can go straight to, which is why I think socialism is important, and social democracy is a nice, good first step too. Because again, as we both agree, it takes money to make money. So it's just not. I don't know. It just seems kind of. It's almost. It's like destructive, because eventually no one can afford the stuff that capitalism produces, when everybody is not paid enough to live, and clearly it's getting people who are too wealthy, and because people are not wealthy, and there's not enough money at the bottom for people.
It's the Matthew principle. To those that everything is given, everything shall be basically gained, and to those that basically have nothing, nothing will be given. I completely butchered that statement. My apologies for my theoretical theist bigotry. Okay, I'm just throwing words out there now. No, but essentially, wealth inequality is a major issue, especially in these United States, because there are some folks that do extremely well in everything, but at the same time, it's like you kind of Well, that is one of the things. It's like, and even especially within basically these times of plague right now, so much of that is being highlighted right now. We're getting ready to see millions of Americans losing their homes, basically going out on the streets and everything like that. And why is this? But at the same time, you're looking at a lot of these big businesses, a lot of these major Fortune 500 companies and stuff. They're having some of the best years ever. And I sit back there, and I did a video on this, I think almost about 9 months ago now, where basically I watched a conservative president happily signing in up to a $6.2 trillion bill into place, and then basically adult Americans got like what, a $1,200 stimulus check. If there's one thing that I learned from the Democratic primary from Andrew Yang, is that math is important. So I did some very basic math. So I went into the Googles and I Googled how many adult Americans are there in these United States. It was just under 210 million at the time of me checking. Okay, round it up to 210 million. Divide that into $6.2 trillion. You want to know what that comes out to, Smiley and audience? That comes out to about 30 grand per American. We could have had literally 3 months of like $2,500 a week in UBI to do a hard lockdown. If you need to deploy the National Guard to literally make sure people have food and medicine and have your very basic logistics in place so people don't die, you could pay for that right there. Instead, everybody got like a $1,200 check.
We could do less than that, like you said. We could do half that, and we could have had a lockdown for like 2 months,
6 weeks.
3
You
months,
eradicate 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. You eradicate the threat. Will it be completely obliterated? No, but you can deal with the sporadic clusters, and it's manageable at that point. But we didn't.
Nope.
We're bleeding ourselves.
We're pretty much, and I think we're going through a second spike right now. I don't know if it's going down.
The cases up here in Massachusetts, we've had several consecutive days of over 5,000 cases a day, man.
Oh my God! Hold on, let me see what the rate is currently. Let's see.
I think we're going to see a trend just all over the place just after Thanksgiving travels and everything like that. I mean, this is your standard models. You're looking about, and again, I ain't a doctor or anything, about a week or two after any major meeting. So like after Halloween, we saw a little bit of a bump over here. And then after Thanksgiving, I mean, let's face it. I mean, people are going to see each other in varying degrees and amounts. And the more and more interactions you have within any type of complex system, you're going to see a spike in cases. I mean, this is just naturally to be expected. I mean, we do have a number of vaccines that basically are coming out. I know even in Russia and stuff, they literally were setting up the clinics, and at least according to, I think it was the Independent or something, they had some videos that looked like they were at least from some of these facilities. Again, hopefully, and this is the thing, kind of seeing a light at the end of the tunnel here. Hopefully, if we could start to get these vaccines and everything, a lot of folks are like, oh, vaccines, oh, blah, blah, blah. We're not a big fan. It's like, with all due respect, I still remember going to school and getting like the MMR vaccine. It's like measles, mumps, and rubella and everything. It's like, okay, we have these things. Why? Because measles is even more contagious than this. Yeah.
Well, luckily we do have that vaccine coming along. It looks like currently things are kind of still on the rise, or they've plateauing a little bit. But yeah, the holidays are probably not going to be great for it, especially when people see a lot of their older family and stuff like that. I'm a little worried.
Dude, my dad's like 82 years old, man. It's one of those things. I realize, dude, he ain't no spring chicken anymore, but at the same time, I prefer to have him around for as many years as I can. I mean, is that maybe a selfish thing? Yeah, but it's one of those things where I also got to acknowledge.
I'm pretty sure he probably agrees, though.
Oh, yeah. No. This is the thing. It's like you want to live your life, but at the same time, you have a novel virus that's out here and everything. Is it a wicked bad flu with a much higher ability to infect? Yes. Now, we were talking a little bit before about kind of like complex systems and stuff. And let's face it, people get pneumonia from the flu. People die from pneumonia from the flu. This has similar effects, but it's like 5 times more infective. That's the thing.
It leaves like lasting damage for a lot of people.
Dude, I've been following this, and I remember I started covering this. I interviewed a young Filipino who was living in Hong Kong at the time in mid-February, And I asked her about what was going on over there. And she did have some concerns in that a lot of their food stores, a lot of like their chemicals like bleach and stuff, they were running low for a while. Now, Hong Kong is also an island as well. But I asked her as far as what was going on there. And from what she told me is one of her friends ending up getting the virus. And apparently the way they traced it is she got it from her boss, who literally was just kind of like walking in and around her. Now, that at the time did seem to correspond with some of the reports saying that it was heavily aerosolized as well. As far as precautions, well, exactly. The long, because I mean, the way I equate this, it's literally to, and again, smoking is bad, but it's okay. I take a cigarette. I light it up. I'm inside right now. That is bad, but it's all right. If I'm inside an enclosed area, if I am smoking, people can smell that. That's something relatable that people have experienced. Now, if I go outside, and I'm exhaling and you're 6 feet away and the wind ain't blowing right at you, it's probably really not going to bother you that much. You can see this. You go outside when it's cold out, you see your breath. I mean, this is things that we come into contact with. And this is what really bothers me, Smiley. It's the sheer fact we politicize this. Why the hell are we politicizing this? It's like, we have science. I don't know about you, man. You seem to be a little bit younger than me, but all I know is growing up, we were told it's like, well, don't go to work when you're sick. There are these things called germs and stuff like that, that when you cough, you sneeze, you want to cover up the best you can. And dude, part of me that really bothers me, and this is why I'm a bit more of a lefty, is that I tend to think we could have minimized a lot of these effects if we had more PTO. If folks had more PTO to literally, they're not feeling well, don't go to work. Why do people go to work? Because they got to make money, because they got to pay their bills, because they don't want to lose everything they have. And this is why a certain level of a social safety net makes a lot of sense, because it probably would have helped us avoid exacerbating a lot of these problems.
Absolutely. I mean, the real problem is that whole QAnon thing. That really fucked everything up for a lot of people. Because they made, I don't know why, I guess people just enjoy spreading misinformation for whatever reason. I guess it's just fun. Because
some folks just want to see the world burn. And, this is also why I say with great memes comes great responsibility.
You're absolutely right, too. That's a fun way of saying it, but you're absolutely true. I mean, that's how we spread most of our information nowadays. It's just little pictures that are 100 by 100 pixels that have like text on them, and then they're quick and easy, and they they just get in your head, and then that's how they do it, and they spread. And it's so easy to just fake anything. It's just like you expect everybody to look up things, but then of course they have like nice websites now that are all fake too. It's difficult for the average person to
it is hard to dude. I'll be straight up. One of my friends, a literal doctor, PhD, at some point I'm seeing him share like the Babylon Bee, and I'm like, I'm unsure if he's doing it in a satirical way on Facebook, and I'm just kind of watching it. I'm like, the Babylon Bee providing years of satire and everything. And I'm just looking at the titles, and I'm like, to be fair, I'm pretty sure this is just confirming your particular biases and everything. Now,
wait, are they like the Onion?
Yes. It basically, actually, maybe it was the Onion in and of itself. It's like, well, you see these things, and whether it's left or right, because they will kind of cut both ways and stuff. It's just that if folks hear things that confirm their biases, very often it's so easy to go with it. Like there was that like 5G thing where basically a gentleman, at least what he said after the case was, he literally just opened up a particular like a piece of equipment that was said 5G and stuff on it, and he just started in something that said COV-19. He literally he's like, look at this and everything, and then what people are outraged and everything, all these conspiracies. And then like 2 weeks later, he's like, yeah, here's me actually doing this and everything. Y'all were fooled. You heard what you wanted to hear.
Did you wait? You went to your own 5G thing and you saw it?
No, this was I saw this video circling around where it was an alleged gentleman that retired from or quit the telecom industry. Maybe he was fired, I don't know. And then what he did is he just took like a piece of equipment that said for installation at 5G tower. He had basically opened up before the fact soldered in a little thing that said like COV-19.
Oh,
like,
so it was completely fake.
Oh, it was completely fake.
It wasn't even just like a random coincidence.
No. It wasn't a coincidence or anything. I watched something like about a month later where you had the same gentleman. He's like, this is what I did. You fool. Now, whether he was trying to cover his own butter or something after that, or he was just kind of like showing it. He said he was doing it to show the effect of misinformation, which, to be fair, I mean, it was, because I think that was probably shared almost 1 million times or so.
Yeah, I guess that's probably why they do it, is because it gets shared by people. I mean, the news companies have known it for. I mean, but that goes back to my problem with capitalism. Is the issue is that the whole point of capitalism is to generate profit. There's no. It's not a value positive, value negative thing. It's entirely a value neutral thing. It's just, does this make money? And does it not? And what makes money is preying on people's tendencies and their fears and their addictive, personalities and everything like that. That's why the news
lay off members of the workforce, and the stock price goes up because you reduce your expenses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the stock market's surprisingly doing quite well. Last time I checked, and it's, even though people are bad, it just, they gotta get that red line to go up. The red line goes down, and it's a fucking problem. Whereas, what's also interesting is that they have these things called workers' co-ops, which are basically sort of socialism under capitalism, where it's literally just the same thing. It's where, everybody who works in the company gets a say. And those companies do really well. They just, the only thing is they just, I guess, don't generate enough money for the people, because again, they generate the same to even sometimes more money overall, because their workers are happier, so they're more productive. They have better ratings, so people who are conscientious like them more, like Ocean Spray, the cranberry juice place. We love them, and they're a workers co-op. I actually learned that recently. I didn't know.
Are they?
Yeah, they're.
I didn't know that, dude. I get Ocean Spray all the time.
Yeah, they're great too. I mean, it's just they're good on their own. But yeah, if you look on their bottle, they proudly talk about it. So I was impressed with that. And there's this big company in Spain that's one of the biggest textile companies in the world, I think. Let me see. Spain. I don't need to look it up. Well, I mean, might as well. Spain, largest worker co-op. The Montagan. Let me see. Let me share screen.
Oh, it sounds familiar. I think one of the things that co-ops kind of suffer from, in that it could be harder to scale a bit depending on what.
Actually, it works better the bigger it is. Believe it or not.
Really?
They actually, the bigger they are, the more, because again, they, it's not like everybody's got the same goal of the business doing well and them doing well, but they have better, rates of vacation, better, again, workers have they enjoy it more, so they have better things. The issue is more, again, if they're too small, it becomes less of a thing, because I think that in order to enact socialism, I think there should still be some for very small businesses, because having the one thing, and the reason why China works really well, is because when you have a rigid hierarchical structure, when you want things to get done, they get done. The issue is what gets done is not always the best choices. If they're not for the world or whatever. But if they're going to make good profits, and you need to get somebody done. But again, the thing is, people who do that, again, they're voted on. When it's decided democratically, it does just fine, if not better. And it's just that, again, the people, like the shareholders, don't make as much money because the workers have decided that the workers get more money than minimum wage or whatever, So the shareholders, by definition, get less because some of the profits are going to the workers. But again, the workers are the people who decide. You can have a share in that company, but you don't get any more say in it than people who work there.
Right. Well, because you have employee ownership at that point.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's also interesting is no matter how much stock you own in the company, you still have the same power as the workers. However, the people at the top do have more power because they've been elected to do so. Because again, they still want to make money. They're not like, they don't want to have a failing business that's your livelihood, right? So what they do is they do it, but they don't move their company overseas to where it, might be cheaper labor, but because they want their employees to be happy, and they do well because the employees want to have their jobs, and people, again, they make very high quality stuff, and it's of a reasonable price. And yeah, it's as far as I can tell, the most ethical thing possible. And again, the cranberry juice thing, like those are the main two co-ops that I am aware of, and they're they're doing great. So I don't understand why it isn't a more, well, because again, the reason is because you can personally make more money if you own the company and take all the money.
It's one of those things where basically under a fiduciary duty to maximize return on investment to your shareholders, your job is to maximize return on investment to your shareholders, not necessarily making sure that the employees have optimal wages, vacation time, and that multifaceted balance model for your workforce within the company versus we just need to increase the bottom line.
And what's also interesting is they do more ethical stuff too, because again, people who work for them don't necessarily want to do bad things. They don't want to do the easy way that dumps stuff into the lake or whatever, and try to just use the lawyers to pay for it
you don't have the incentive of, well, this company is screwing me over, so screw these guys. I'm going to cut corners and do the minimal amount of work possible. You actually have a passion because it's like, the company is helping take care of me. I'm going to do the best dang job I can to help the company out as well. So it's a reciprocal relationship there.
Yeah. As an anarcho-syndicalist, which is basically sort of like anarchist socialist, where the companies should be run democratically, I think that the limit, and this is just a guess for now, until there's more data, I can't say. But I'd say, because the issue is, again, if it gets too small, it actually can become kind of an inhibitor. But where if, like, say we are running a business of YouTube videos and we hire people to as contractors to, say, edit our videos or to make thumbnails, which again you don't have to do, but when you get big enough it becomes useful because A, you're making some money, and B, you can it makes it easier so that you can actually do more of the content creation. But having them participate in equal say in how you run your channel isn't necessarily there's no real benefit to that. So I think a good general rule is it should be decided based on it should be syndicates are workers collectives that are of the individual companies, but also they have councils where they sort of become the government, and then sort of like it would be like the council of like YouTubers and online entertainers and everything like that. So an elected group of them would then decide the rules for the general population. So that's how it would be. And so I think it would sort itself out just fine anyway. But I think a general rule would be until the boss is like, in a small company, the boss and the owner basically does everything, and then they hire some people to help out, and then they still do stuff. I think once the company is at the point where the boss can afford to no longer participate in the labor to the same extent that their employers do, I think and their employees do, and they have enough to sort of become hands off, then I think it should start to. Then I think that's the point that it should move over. But again, I really think that it makes the most sense. Because again, I like democracy. I think democracy is, the more democracy, the better, especially nowadays when they, the biggest argument against democracy for everywhere, which comes from, again, conservatives who are all about, the American freedom and everything. But when it actually comes down to it, they're not really all about it, that they say mob rule will become the issue. But I really don't see that happening, because if everything is directly democratic and we get rid of all politicians, I mean, not overnight, but we start to do that, then people will naturally become more informed. Because again, imagining if all news companies weren't just trying to profit, and they weren't just beholden to shareholders, they would actually become real news places that really actually their job is to inform, and not just to make money, and then, make money by informing people or by, sending a bias. Because right now they're not to inform, they're to convince. They want people to see things a certain way rather than just see things. And when everybody is well educated, well healthy, and the companies are being run as the workers would wish, and as everyone who works among them would wish. And again, people are voted into like management positions, but you're not like promoted, you're voted into management positions. And if you're a bad manager, then you get voted out rather than, just like you just got to deal with it. So it just seems way more effective and way more meritocratic than the way things are now. And it seems almost like I really can't think of any argument against it. I haven't heard any convincing. I haven't even heard one that works. I've just heard some people be like, well, they don't really work. And then it's like, well, I have this evidence of co-ops that do work. So I don't really.
I think a lot of people's hesitation is that we have an established system.
Yeah,
many people have basically earned a great deal of wealth and have been very successful to varying degrees over the years. In the sheer fact, basically, people are proposing something that is change in and of itself, that they are very skeptical to change at the same time.
Yeah, well, you do raise a good point, which is that there are people who it does not benefit, which are people who are already exploiting like tons of people and making a lot of money that way. And those people often have access to lobbyists. But I'm just saying the average, person like you and me, like the person who, you may be, as you said, you have a comfortable lifestyle, which doesn't necessarily make you bourgeois or whatever. It's just because the bourgeoisie is really just the ownership class. So if you own a business, then you would be considered perhaps a bourgeoisie. But again, I don't think that you should. Even if you did run a business and if you actively worked in it, I think that, you could still run it any way you wanted to. It's once again that you are, when you're spending more time outside of the company than in the company, then I think that maybe you should give your workers some more power and sort of be incentivized to do that legally. But it's only those people that have any reason to dislike it. But again, we're all better off when we're all better off. Even the fabulously wealthy people who have like 8 yachts, like the Jeff Bezos of the world, they will still get to live in a society where people who could create amazing, wonderful things, because again, what's the point of being wealthy besides being able to buy wonderful stuff and experience, luxury or whatever? If we give access to people who can create things rather than just force them into a job that they don't like to make ends meet, then think of all the new and amazing things that we could have that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. You wouldn't, think of all the stuff you're missing.
The sheer number of geniuses that we're missing out on harnessing due to whether it's lack of food, lack of healthcare, or something just all across this entire planet. I mean, this bothers the hell out of me just because so many folks that I've even talked to folks that are pretty dang far right that maybe are saying things that a lot of folks would consider very offensive. And I'm like,
I would love to hear it from them.
Well, this is the thing. It's like, I've literally spoken with folks that are quote unquote black nationalists. I've literally spoken with folks that are quote unquote white nationalists and stuff.
You get a lot of good people.
When you boil it all down, man, it's like most folks just want to live a good life and be left alone.
Yeah, agreed. Exactly. And the best way to do that is to make sure everyone is comfortable enough to live their life alone. I mean, not everybody has to, do the from each according to their ability to each according to their need thing, especially nowadays. I mean, from each according to their ability to each according to their need made sense during, the pre and early post industrial revolution times, when we didn't have literal Postmates and Uber Eats and shit like that you can have like stuff or like Amazon's drone delivery, which isn't, widespread, but is still a thing.
They're actually doing that now?
I think so. I don't know if they really are, but I know that
I think they had a pilot program, pun intended. But
the problem is I think they're too loud.
Let me ask you something, because I do think this is something that a lot of folks that are a bit further left than maybe your standard quote unquote liberal. This is, I think,
liberals aren't left; they're actually center. The only reason they seem left is because America is so far to the right.
This is very interesting, and that's another thing that I have heard from folks kind of on the right, and that liberals are kind of a bit more center, and that it kind of explains a lot. And perhaps it comes down to the viewing perspective and the fact, like you said, I mean, we still do have the whole meme of America, because I mean, heck, that still lives within me as well. while at the same time
It's
is
fun.
why. No, I get it, it's fun, but I mean, you got to acknowledge, hey, I mean, nobody's freaking perfect, man. But why? And I hear a lot of folks that are maybe a bit further left, they're kind of like doing all these things from like Lenin and stuff like that, whether they're a Lenin Marxist, a Maoist, or something like that. It's like there are all these different takes and everything. And I sit back and I'm like, okay, it's like I remember reading the Communist Manifesto, and I'm like, it's probably like, I don't know, 15, 16, almost 20 years ago now.
They need to be retranslated into modern English, because I've read some of them and they're just hard to comprehend sometimes. They're just so difficult to get into. I don't blame people for not reading them.
Well, I sit back and I remember at the time reading, I'm like, that's fascinating. I mean, in principle, I do kind of like, I totally get what they're saying there. I have no idea how we could like institute this without necessarily falling prey to the whole spamming the communism now button, and then leading to like massive authoritarianism that kind of we have seen.
Again, yeah, the thing was Russia. Well, I mean, it's a little more complicated than this, but really the fall of the Soviet Union happened with Stalin. Well, Lenin actually wasn't even that bad. He was a bit, I would say, a bit too revolutionary in the sense that he really liked, killing the landowners and everything like that. He was a little bit too wall happy, but putting people to the wall. But he was still a lot more democratic. Stalin came in. I mean, his position was general secretary, which was just a secretary position, but he was just so conniving and strongman that he actually, his job was to get people, like to let people know when there were meetings and stuff. And he just wouldn't tell people about meetings that, if they weren't really like sympathetic to him or rather loyal, I think the word would be. And that was really the downfall. The Soviet Union at the beginning was actually great because they went from essentially feudalism to a modern day country in about like 20 years. And then the Stalin's 5-year plan, which was actually Trotsky's plan, but the problem was Trotsky was going to be the one next, but Stalin, used his power to solidify it and he kicked him out. So he wasn't really able to go. Trotsky wasn't super great either, but he was even better than Lenin, in my opinion. And if he had set the president for the Soviet Union, I think they probably would have beat the United States in the Cold War, to be honest, because of the people that would have come after and the fact that it would have been more democratic. But the problem was Russia was feudalist. And so they went straight from like a monarchy to this socialism. So they were still sort of in the mindset of, authoritarianism and stuff. This was in the 1800s. Like it wasn't, they didn't really understand democracy to the level that like even the United States didn't have, women's right to vote at that point yet, It's like it really wasn't, or maybe it was shortly after that. I'm not sure exactly when the thing came. I know that it was
a different time. And again, I'm not really up on my Russian or Soviet history to any real degree. But my big thing is kind of going back to, if you're talking about like something like a Das Kapital, which I've only really met one person.
Oh my God, that book!
They've actually read it, like a 1,200-page book. I've only met one person that at least says that they have actually read it. But my big thing that I took away from what folks have told to me is that I thought the whole concept of quote unquote communism was something that would happen in a post-scarcity society that the people would voluntarily choose.
Yeah, that's when communism would take over, in my opinion, too. I think that, and I think we're actually much closer to post-scarcity than we might realize. The issue is because, again, even Amazon wants to change its workers over to robots. But the thing about automation is, under capitalism, it's actually it's actually kind of a sort of a double-edged sword to capitalism, because again, you put all these people out of work so you don't have to pay them anymore, but then you have all these people who are out of work, and it's like, what are they going to do? And I don't think that
it makes Andrew Yang look pretty darn smart.
It does. Unfortunately, I don't like I don't think that a good solution is because, again, I don't like capitalism, but the problem with just doing basic income is that it kind of actually can create a ceiling, because once you say, okay, well, we'll get rid of all these jobs, but we'll give people basic income, but then they have no way of entering they'd have no way of getting out of that.
They have no way
You know?
of actually getting up between.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking
actually-
about a complex system here as well. But kind of going back to what we kind of started going down, like the whole Russian Revolution before that,
Mhm.
is the sheer fact that if you have these documents and these writings from 100-something years ago, like you were saying, Smiley Man, it's like, don't we have any new ideas or
Yeah,
anything? Like, why would we use a model from like 100-something years ago if we have the current quote unquote meta, the current
Mhm.
technology and everything? Can't we figure out a better way? And I think one of the things that I've heard from folks on kind of like the greater side of RedTube and stuff like that is like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that, because I'm hearing so many of these same old ideas and everything. And my pitch would be,
do you have anyone in particular? I might know who you're referring to.
It's like non-compete and stuff like that.
Non-compete? Yeah, he's an anarchist. He's not bad.
Yeah. No. Him and Luna are an awesome team and everything. Do I agree with everything they say? No, but you know what? I can respect them.
Mhm. He actually is the one that convinced me to be anarchist, because I was in that point where I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I know capitalism. I mean, that's when I started on the social democracy, or social democracy.
Democrat.
I thought
the thing, it confuses people because a democratic socialist and a social democrat.
It's such a
The
dumb
social
name.
democrat is the socialist, the democratic socialist. See, people are confused. They hear capitalism, they're like America. They hear all these things and they're like, "Are you a commie?"
Yeah, right.
And everything, and just like that mimetic comes out there.
And here's what I think. I think that the name social democracy is stupid, especially because there's democratic socialism, which is a different thing too. But they're similar, but they are different. I've heard the definition, but I heard the difference between them like 100 times, and I still don't quite know what it is offhand. But it's
that's a problem if we're trying to.
What I like is social capitalism.
Yeah.
Because think of social, they think of like social security, socialized healthcare. They don't necessarily think of socialism. I mean, they do, but they don't at the same time. So I think social capitalism would be a good way, because then if you socialize capitalism, it makes a lot more sense, and it goes back to that it takes money to make money thing. However, I don't think that that's a permanent solution, because, again, that still doesn't remove the problem of everything being related to profit seeking. And it doesn't, again, give people the democratic power that they would need. Because, again, those things can be taken away, just because they're there. I mean, that's what they're trying to do in England. They've been trying to take away the National Health Service for a good few years now. I don't think it's going to happen. But, I mean, that was their whole thing with the Brexit and everything, too, is they're trying to get away from their, like, oh, they're too bureaucratic and everything like that. And, again, bureaucracy, all that stuff can be eliminated with direct democracy. You just hold referendums, give anybody the opportunity to suggest something, let them explain it for a little bit, and then see if people like it. And then when more people like it, and then eventually, you can put it on the docket and then let people vote on it. And if they don't like it, then they don't like it. And if they do, then it can happen. It just seems like duh. It seems so obvious to me. I mean, again,
my one issue with a pure democracy is that it can have very unintended consequences. And the reason I say this is because, and again, it would depend on how it was formatted. The reason why I say this is because I remember when I was in high school, my senior year, I was sitting in Latin 2, and all of a sudden the principal came on the loudspeaker and said, "A plane has crashed into the World Trade Center." Yeah. And I thought that was very strange, because I remember a couple of years ago, I'd seen something on the news as I was going to school as a kid, like a Cessna had flown into like the Empire State Building, and the pilot ended up surviving. I think somebody ended up losing their life as an injury after the fact. But I'm like, why is the principal saying that? And then before the end of Latin 2, he had come on a second time saying another plane has hit the other World Trade Center. And that was 9/11. The reason I bring this up is I remember the sentiment at the time that was going around. And my issue was, if you quote unquote had a pure democracy, I'm afraid we probably would have seen the use of nuclear weapons.
That is a good point. You're right that people could be irrational, but I still don't think
it again, it depends on how it's set up. But just I remember at the time, it's like, who did this to us? Obliterate them was the kind of, that was the mimetic that I was taking. And again, that is kind of my holdup in that. In general, should we have referendums? I totally am for that. But
my response would be that I think In that case, first of all, I believe that if we were in a more socialism type syndicalist sort of scenario, we wouldn't. Because again, the main reason we went there was because of oil. Like they did, we were specifically against Al Qaeda because of the 9/11, and I'm not going to go into any conspiracies or anything like that. I don't even think it matters at this point whether it's real or not, because it was tragic and in the past. But I mean, the things we have done to them at this point have sort of surpassed that, in my opinion. I mean, it was very acute, and I totally understand that a lot of people might disagree with me on this, but I think that I think that we've at least, because the reason that we haven't beaten them yet is, I think, because again, the war isn't just against terrorists. I mean, when was the last time you even heard the term the war on terror? It's like the problem is they're tiny little, basically anarchistic cells that are basically, they blend in, and the problem is we spent so much time bombing them that they don't like us, not because of our freedom or whatever, which I don't think was ever the reason, because again, we armed them against the Soviets. The reason that they had the ability to do that was because we gave them the training and the weapons to do all that. So because we didn't want the Soviets to invade Afghanistan back in the whenever, I think the 80s or 70s or something like that. So it's I just feel like if we had begun with the democracy and things like that, and you're absolutely right. I think the military is far too large anyway. I think if we gave people, and I think you're right in that specific point, maybe it wasn't the right time, but I think definitely now we could start introducing more democratic things. And eventually, again, I'm not saying overnight. That's the problem, is there's no overnight. However, I think it could be quicker than most people might think. But I don't see that people would be using nuclear weapons anytime soon. I mean, again, unless there's another terrorist attack, but I don't see that happening too. Again, unless it was domestic, I think, but I hope that things don't get that bad either, because I mean, but there's a lot of unrest going here on both the left and the right. So there's people are worried about a civil war. I don't think that that's going to happen anymore, just because I don't think that we really do that anymore, because people are far too, I don't know. It's hard to organize people to that point, because people are a lot more aware of what war means, and they think about things a lot more through. I mean, not everyone thinks everything through. I mean, there are people who will drive, trucks into protesters and stuff like that. But I mean, if anything, if we were to start a civil war, it wouldn't be the left fighting the United States. It would actually be the right, I think. I think that the far right would be organizing a lot more, because they got the guns. They're the ones who are a lot more, crazy, and the other ones that will actually do this stuff. So I think if we're worried about a civil war, it's more the alt-right people. Are they still the alt-right, or they call themselves something else now?
This is one of the things, because I hear a lot of the same things no matter on what side it is, because it's actually fascinating in many ways, because a lot of times it's like I'll hop on kind of a bit of more lefty tube things, and I'm hearing a lot of things that you're saying, and then all of a sudden it's like I'm seeing highlighted examples, and I'm like, all right, are some of these maybe a little bit more superficial? Okay, maybe. Are there other examples? Because I will hear terrible news stories that I don't hear about on kind of more right-wing channels, and I'll hop over to kind of more right-wing channels, and they're saying, oh, well, look at all these things here. I'm like, okay, well, what was the situation before that and everything? And I hear a lot of the same gripes. And that's what brings me to, I'm like, okay, well, if you truly hate each other that much, maybe we should re-legalize dueling, and you guys can have it out in Mortal Kombat.
I would have to be a fair one, because again, I think they have a lot more guns than we do. That being said, a lot of people on the left are very pro-gun. That's why who are anti-gun are the middle. Say again.
Well, and this is the thing, and the reason why I say dueling is because you can challenge somebody. Basically, what happens, because the other reason I say this is because we also did have a history. We can't forget that Alexander Hamilton, he did end up losing his life in a duel against Mr. Burr. This was after his presidency and everything, but at the same time, we have a notable historic figure that ended up dying. It came down to honor. And one of the big things I do see is a lot of folks are saying very hateful things very easily because of things because of the internet and everything. And I came to this about 2 years ago, at least in this particular mimetic in my mind, is I heard somebody on a bit more of a lefty channel, I'm not sure if it was an MTV thing or something at the time, saying all these hateful things. Well, back in the day, we used to call them fighting words. And then I was on a stream for a more conservative friend, and then he said something about folks on the left. He's like, we used to call these fighting words. And I'm like, okay, time out for just a second. I literally heard the exact same term heard by a very progressive individual and then a very conservative individual. Okay, we have a meeting of the minds here. If they're fighting words, what did we used to do? You demanded satisfaction. Basically, you asked for an apology. The person could apologize, admit that they made a mistake. Okay, boom, we move on. If we're in the time where folks are like, no, I don't want to apologize for anything, and you're being a dick to somebody, then at that point, that person could demand satisfaction, challenge somebody to a duel if they were under no obligation to accept. However, because, I mean, people might throw frivolous things out there saying, oh, I'm going to duel you because your stew wasn't all that great or something. That just seems kind of frivolous in my opinion. Yeah, right. People usually recognize it. However, if you're going around insulting somebody's spouse, defaming their character, and you're maliciously, continuously doing this, people can objectively say, for the most part, it's like, dude, you're being an asshole to that person. Yeah. Pardon my French, my apologies to the French. But you say that to things, so they get challenged to a duel. You don't accept. If you don't accept, guess what? I don't know. Does that make you yellow? This is coming from a guy wearing a yellow shirt. So
yeah. I feel like we that's an interesting point of view. I think that we can handle that better in court than I think that, because again, the gun doesn't agree. Like a duel doesn't necessarily show who was right or who was wrong. And then again, I mean, obviously
in the game, because not everybody has the ability to have high-powered attorneys and everything. That ultimately does explain a lot of what's going on.
How would you do duels? I'm curious.
The way it would work, and again, I don't particularly specify, and hopefully I should finish my dueling video tomorrow at some point, so I can actually put this up. I've been talking about this for months, but essentially, somebody says something or does something. The person can basically say, I would like an apology. That person declines. At that point, you could demand satisfaction. You challenge them to a duel. Now, that person does not need to accept. However, if that person does accept, they can then set the terms for the duel. So whether it's pistols at dawn, long swords till first blood, or heck, whether they just want to have a card game of freaking Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, or Magic the Gathering, it's about honor. This is the thing. It is
going back to living in an anime.
Well, exactly. And that's the thing. You are having an event to basically say, I'm putting my honor and potentially life on the line. It helps give people skin in the game. And the whole reason I'm saying this, not that it would actually happen, is the fact that people could say, oh, well, you know what? Maybe rather than screaming and saying horrible things at each other and potentially having to put my life on the line, maybe we can figure this thing out. I personally think most folks are good people. And if most folks are good people, we can figure this stuff out.
Yeah, I would say, I think trial by Yu-Gi-Oh battle would be fun. A Yu-Gi-Oh duel. That would be an interesting way to settle things.
Dude, why don't we have duel discs? Come on, man.
Right?
It's been out there for so long. Dude, I saw a web shooter. I saw a web shooter on Instagram. Dude, we got Spider-Man web shooters and stuff. Where's my holo disc?
We could have, well, first of all, here's what I think. I think we could have all of that, first of all, in VR. Because again, VR is super expensive to make. So I think that if we had a lot more people had the opportunity to, rather than work at whatever, they could invest their time and education into figuring out technology and creating VR. And then we could have, great duels in VR, like actual Yu-Gi-Oh style dual discs things. But then eventually, I mean, who knows? Maybe we could have it in real life, because again, people would be doing things because they wanted to, not because they were worried about, putting food on the table. I feel like a lot more interesting things would happen that way. We would have a lot more.
Let me tie that back into co-op. Sorry to cut you off there, but it's just, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I truly think so much of the future for a lot of these, especially like given the pandemic and things that we're seeing in so many of like these very large businesses that have all these studios and all these major office spaces and everything, a lot of these folks decentralizing, they can save enormous costs right there on real estate. Plus, at the same time, access your fan base. I'm not sure if you saw that, what was it, the Star Wars, that like Vader origin story and stuff like that, got like a couple of million views or
A
something.
new movie?
No, it was
Yeah,
a fan-made thing. It was like a
Yeah,
15, 20-minute thing. Dude, the quality of that, like, I truly think that if a lot of these studios, they were to allow a lot of their fan base access to using their material to generate user-created things. So whether it's for a particular IP creating a video, or even just like a level builder within a game, something like Ark Survival Evolved, you create your own amazing island and ecosystem and stuff. Guess what? You spent time, passion, and investment in that. I feel like you should be able to profit off that if you would. Like, if that comes out, gets released as a couple $1 download, millions of folks download it, I think you should be able to earn the fruits from your labor. And since
or what if it's just donations?
Well, that's the other thing. And this is my idea. And especially when you brought up like social capitalism, or whatever term that you would just use there, my pitch is democratic capitalism. What is democratic capitalism? It's basically what you just said there. We're already starting to engage in it. So whether it's a Patreon and helping to support different folks, whether they're an artist, whether they're a YouTuber, this, that, or the other thing, it's people within communities supporting other folks within the communities. I think that's how we can actually knit things together. And again, we're doing very social-based programs and helping out individuals in the community, but we're also utilizing free market principles. And this is how I said on a particular broadcast, how folks on the left, this is how we can actually achieve many of our goals by utilizing conservative principles to help achieve our goals. And the thing that was very sad about that, and I do have to highlight this, is I said that on, I think, one of Naga Pete's chats. I said we can use basically conservative principles, quote unquote, against them, or something like that. And the response I got from an individual there was, by lying to them, question mark. And that made me so sad, because it's like, is this really the point we're at, where we just assume that, you know what, well, the other side is lying and stuff, so we have to lie too? And that bothers the hell out of me, because what I meant by that, I'll give you an example. So I live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And this was something that kind of bothered me, that President Obama said in one of the debates with Mitt Romney. Was like, oh, Mitt, Obamacare is 95% Romney care. Now, well, that may be true on certain levels. What President Obama didn't mention was that Governor Romney and our legislature, they made $1 billion in deep cuts. Those cuts affected many people. However, what those cuts also did was, we paid for Romney care, because at that point you take away the conservative argument. Well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, we made the cuts. Oh, so at that point you'll have some Republicans that will argue with you, because, well, they're Republicans and you should expect that to happen. But at that point the argument becomes, well, we don't want somebody that's down on their luck to get access to potential affordable health care. That's not a good argument. Now, is that a bit of a straw man? In some ways, probably. But at the same time, if you take away the core argument there, well, now I think you can actually have progress. So other things within democratic capitalism is, now this past year this past year we had the election. So the issue we ran into, there was so much fake news about a real campaign. So I did real news about a fake campaign. I was running for the president of this Internet of Stuff and Things. And one of the things that I wanted to see was like algorithmic fairness as well, basically having a bit more openness there. And this is something that I kind of take away from Andrew Yang as well, rather than necessarily having to include or incorporate potential VAT tax, which in some ways does make a lot of sense depending on how it's tailored and everything. A lot of folks in Europe use it. Then again, there's a concern that that would take away from the economic growth engine of these United States. Again, I can understand that, but what's a way in which you could fund people getting money for something of value? Well, how about your data, your choice? In that, basically, let's say Facebook, they make something like $26 to $35 a month, I heard, based upon just every individual uses metadata. My thought is, you should be, the data that's being used, that depending on all these terms and services, you're just clicking through. Dude, I still remember when an Apple terms of service thing was like under 100 pages. I think I got like 38 pages in, and all I remember was, you have no rights, you have no rights, we has all the rights, you have no rights. I'm like, okay, I'm sure at many points, if you challenge any individual thing here, depending on the case, might be ruled unconscionable. Now, again, I'm not an attorney. That's my father, Mr. Memes. Now, my big thing is, if these companies are making all this money off of our data, we should have the right to receive payment for that data. So either
Agreed.
you're not allowed to use a person's data, however, they have the ability to opt in to provide their data, and you pay them, I don't know, like half or 60% or whatever, based upon the earnings of that data. Guess what? If enough companies did that, you could probably make, on an individual level, at least a couple $100 a month.
I know, right?
Here on a couple $100 a month.
It's a mutually beneficial option.
But that's a method to use current existing free market things in order to help folks out. And especially in times like this that are really tough, a few $100 extra a month that literally is already being used to be productive for private companies. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's an idea I hadn't heard before, but it's like, if you can do that.
I feel like more people should be talking about that. I've thought of that too. It makes perfect. Like we use them for free, and that's the sort of the argument of like, well, if you're using it for free, then you're the product, right? Well, they're making enough money that they should absolutely give us some. Like it makes, and then people will be like, oh, I'm getting paid to use Facebook, and it'll give you incentive because, as you said, if it's a percentage of the ad revenue that they're getting, then it should really be, the more you use it, the more you get. So like it makes more sense.
And this is also why it's for things like YouTube and stuff like that. Like I personally think that a lot of these social media sites and everything, many of them brought to us by Google, which, do I have some issues with Google? Sure. But at the same time, I look at the overall thing. It's like, dude, I use so many of their services. I've totally benefited from them. I think in general, we've seen a lot of net positivity, not to say that there aren't negative things that go along with that. But the sheer fact is, I view this as the modern means of production. And that's literally also why I think we should be careful before taking those means away from somebody. And if you're going to do that, make sure you have a very clear process by which you're going to do it. Like if you're going around and you're like broadcasting, because I remember there was a thing with, I think, like Lauren Southern, where she had got like booed off of Patreon a couple of years ago. And it's like, well, what happened? Well, she was doing this and that. I'm like, didn't she fire an incendiary device at a navigable vessel or something? And like, you see that, well, she was out of range and stuff. It's like, you don't think that's that. My big thing is, what Patreon needs to do is make sure you have very clear terms of service in that. And I realize from a legal perspective, they need to have it all vague and stuff. This is where our legislators and our leaders come in to kind of like fill in the gap, where it's like, okay, if you're doing anything that could be construed as promoting violence against folks, like, I don't know, firing an incendiary device at a navigable vessel full of immigrants or something like that, I don't know.
Did she really do that? That's pretty crazy.
She fired a flare gun at a boat, I guess, that was falling around a vessel that
a flare gun could do some damage.
You could light a fire, man, and everything like that. You could start a forest fire if there was anything.
And if you like shot somebody with it, like it could catch their clothes. It would definitely give them some terrible burns.
I've watched videos where basically final bosses and or alien creatures and stuff have been taken out with flare. My big thing is, yes,
I've seen movies. I've played video games. You could kill somebody with those.
Hey, dude, server first level 80 Death Knight for the win,
I've
baby.
played Battlefield. You can do it. Yeah.
No, but I think one of the worst things in that, it's just that people show somebody that, whether we like to admit it or not, very often we fall into either cults of personality or a form of idolatry as well. You're seeing a very popular individual who at one point may have said they were alt-right before they realized Richard Spencer owned the domain name and stuff like that, everything. I don't know, but the fact is, you had a lot of folks that aren't a big fan of certain folks. Seeing this person do that, how far away is firing a flare gun at a boat that is out of range from doing other things? And these are the things that I think a lot of these platforms need to have clearer terms of service. Again, our legislators need to step up. Our leaders need to help lead by example, or at least putting forth legislation to help clarify these things. While at the same time, it's like, dude, I think something like a Patreon or something like that for frickin' everybody, where folks can help other folks. And if we can utilize some form of, whether it's government or something like that, to help minimize transaction fees, that we can maximize the profitability to individual folks. It's like, you know what, if somebody is passionate about something going on, and again, I would love to see a lot of these things where it's like, you know what, you're doing level designs for this particular game, or you're putting together this particular fan fiction or something like that. If folks within the community can help you out, if you can make a sustainable living on that, dude, that sounds like the American dream right there. Might you have to do something in the meantime to fill in before you get up to that level? But the fact is, and you were pointing this out, being able to access that upward social mobility is the goal.
Precisely.
You don't want people being stuck at zero or below.
Yeah, that's why I think social capitalism is a better name. I think that we should really get more social democratic policies, because I mean, there's even a great, like I said, make America the land of opportunity again. Like, wouldn't that be great? We could turn, use MAGA and turn it into something actually good. Because again, like I said, I'm an anarchist, but I'm not an idiot. Like, I know that we need to do things. We need to do something. So let's do something. Like, it's like, that's why I wasn't one of those, like, I voted for Biden, because I was just like, look, we just need to get Trump out of office. I'm no fan of Biden. I don't think he has really, I mean, he's pretty far right too. So like, he's not great, but he's still like within, like, he's not going to go around saying fake news, even if the news is like fake, let alone real. Like, he's going to actually listen to people at the very least, or at least his cabinet. Well, I don't know. He's a little, but we need to have access to democracy again. We need to give people the opportunity to at the very least, live a life where they can have an apartment and have access to healthcare and food. And I think the most important thing is they should have a little bit of extra money for either saving or for just, really just to save. You should have more than you need, not by much, but like a little bit, so that they can put it away. They can, buy an expensive thing like once in a while, get some because you need something nice every once in a while. Every like few months to like a year, you need to buy like a new TV or a new car even, or something like that. Take out a loan. If you have this stuff, you can at least make payments on the loan, so you don't have to like save up a lot of money. But then you could also use it to give to people's Patreons and stuff like that. And Patreon would be a great way of. We need more of those companies too. I suppose we don't need that many more, but we do, because competition is important too.
There's a left. I'm not sure if it's camaraderie or something like that. There is a lefty one that's coming up. I still need to put them in touch with somebody, one of the reps from the Adult Performers Actors Guild. So I realized, like, what was it, OnlyFans and stuff. They had some changes that had kind of riled a little bit of feathers, because of, I think it was a Belle Duffy. I don't know. It was
wait, just because somebody had an OnlyFans?
Well, what ended up happening is one individual, I think, apparently, and I'm not sure if this was fraudulent or not, so again, take it with a grain of salt, is it was alleged that an individual said she was going to put up certain types of photos, and then apparently
I think you're right. Yeah, false advertising.
And there ended up having to be like a refund of almost like $1 million. So you're dealing with those chargeback fees.
Well, you can't lie to people.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You can't mislead. So basically, that kind of restructured some folks within there. And then one of my friends, who happens to be pretty high up there on OnlyFans, I asked her if she happened to have noticed a bit of a difference there. And apparently, they had lowered the maximum donation down by, I think, $250 down to like, I think, $100 or something. So she did say it did affect her a little bit as well.
That's weird. I do kind of. I feel like having a maximum donation limit is. I can see arguments for it and against it. I don't know exactly where I would stand on that, because, I mean, there are people who because the problem with OnlyFans is that's another like preying on people's. Mostly. I think the problem would be solved if we injected more democracy into people's everyday lives and their workplaces and stuff like that. Because when people don't have a lot of control, that's why people aren't. Having as many relationships anymore. People are becoming more atomized and lonely these days. And that's where a lot of, fascism comes from, is because they're these it's mostly just lonely men that are, they feel like they're completely rejected by society. And so they want to blame somebody. And it's just because they have a lack of power. That's why we have a depression. epidemic, an opioid crisis, drugs and everything. Because again, people feel like they need an escape, and it's just because they have no control over their lives anymore. And so I can see why people would be addicted to things like OnlyFans and why it might be necessary to have a donation limit. But I don't think that that's right. I think that they should have. The other issue would be, people who pay for OnlyFans and then like screenshot a bunch of stuff and then they put it out for free, and so that person might lose some money that way. But I feel like, again, if we gave people more agency in their lives, people would be happier and there would be less of that overall. And I think that it would just solve a lot of that, in time by itself. Not everything. But I think that, giving people more, again, this is America. We're literally, our whole thing is freedom. And if you're the majority of Americans, you don't have any at all. You have to work all day and all night to barely pay for anything. And now that you have COVID, we have no support for people who are getting sick and everything like that. And then of course, medical bills cost things. So in a pandemic, that's like the worst thing that you can do. So you have to force people out to expose themselves, when again, we could have just basically, I mean, this isn't a great necessarily word, but we could make it like an inoculation, like a vaccine, where it's just like, instead of, giving people the virus, rather we just close down the country for, a good like 6 to 8 weeks and then let people out again, where it's just like, it's like ripping off a Band-Aid, where we just, it's tough for a little while, but then it's okay. And it would be fine, way better that way. So we would solve a lot of those issues.
I think the world would be a much better place with more shared mind-blowing orgasms.
And we could have that if people had enough money to survive, and they wouldn't have to, and they wouldn't have to feel so lonely all the time. And instead of monetizing relationships, like, we could actually allow people some breathing room to go out and actually, meet people. I think that online dating is an amazing thing. Like, it's easier than ever, but the problem is just like, you need to go out on a date and you need to like get to know these people. I mean, if you actually have something going on, it becomes a lot easier. And you have something going on could just mean you have your own, like, again, having your own place at 18 because you're legally an adult, so you have enough money to get a small but nice apartment. Again, that's the other thing too, is these things can't be like left to rot. They have to be upkept. And, well, I'm not saying put everybody in a hotel. I'm just saying, give people like a room and a kitchen. And, like, what more do you need at the beginning, and then let them go to school, let them work or whatever, and then have more say in how their work is run. And all these problems would really just fix themselves over time.
Now, the counter to that would be that it would be nice to have all sunshine, rainbows, and gumdrops, but you also have to factor in human nature. I do tend to agree with you in that the proper incentive structure would help drive folks towards that, whereas, again, the current structure we have doesn't particularly support going in that direction. Unfortunately, it ends up being very kind of ruthless in many ways, in that you try to just maximize me, so I continue to accumulate to grow, because other folks are going to be me, and take away from me. See, my thing is, I see so much of, unfortunately, the profitability, whether it's basically just kind of putting out like rage candy in this, whether it's right, whether it's left or something, kind of insert person we like destroys all capital letters, insert group we don't like here, which is the current model for a lot of YouTube clickbait. Yeah, but I feel like that issue is not human nature. I think the issue is that comes from people feeling like they're stressed all the time, and again, if everybody was able to just, live comfortably, not like too comfortably, but comfortably at the very least, then they wouldn't have people to blame. I mean, if anything, the biggest problem would then become boredom. And then what would you do with boredom is then you start to go out more and you start to hang out with people and get to know people and, play games, be more sociable, because again, it's not a survival mentality. It's human. I think that's human nature. I think, yeah. Well, I would I'm not sure if I'm agreeing or disagreeing with you at this point. I just need to get this meme out of my head there. I'll give you a quick example. When Ark Survival Evolved, yes, I'm going back there. Yes, I like my dinosaurs and my scalies.
It's a fun
But
game.
I remember when I first started playing that, I played it back in alpha, and I was doing the Mac version, which came out a little over a month later. And I remember going on that game, and my only goal was to create a little fort by the river and basically raise raptors with my cousin. Now, my cousin never ended up playing this particular game, but all I know is at one point I ended up recruiting a bunch of folks. How did I recruit folks? All I know is I would go out there, farm a bunch of materials, gather up a bunch of meat, throw it on the fire. Seeing as the meat spoiled after a point of time, anytime somebody came by, I'm like, "Hey man, what's going on? I got some food on the fire. Come grab some." So I would literally just offer people food like you do in real life and stuff, and everybody's got to eat, and that was a survival game. I ended up gathering up. There ended up being the battle with the Chinese and folks over in Asia there, and there were little like articles written about this. I think back in like 2015 about all the wars. And dude, my experience on that PvP server, I was basically a lower level guy. I was fighting like a Triceratops, and then some individual was riding a raptor. They came by, they stopped, they look at it, and then they ran up to the raptor. Oh, excuse me, the Triceratops. They attacked it with a raptor several times, but they also ended up killing my character. So at the same time, I ran back quickly, and that individual that was on the raptor, and again, apologies for my racism here, but they said like, sorry. So it happened to sound to me like an Asianish individual was apologizing to me. They threw down the skin of an Indiana Jones style hat that ended up being a permanent thing on any of your headgear. Dude, I had that all throughout there. So the individual accidentally killed me. They apologized. I'm like, wait. And this was something that, at least to me, was unique in Ark because you could do the voice over IP to the folks that are around you. So like you could actually talk to people. I'm like, wait a second. Now, had I not had that experience, I might just assume, well, this dude was a dick and just killing me. Oh, he happens to be Asian. Oh, let's do this. I'm like, there's so much of this conflict that's starting here, at least on the server, because people just don't understand each other. I don't know. Is this a model for IRL as well? But basically, long story short, is there ended up being a battle. We end up joining up with a larger tribe, battling the Chinese off the server. Basically, at one point, they ended up murdering my Spinosaurus named Bubbles. It was a very sad thing. We had yet to create the saddle for Bubbles there. But basically, dude, we went on a 30-day like hardcore plan, and we went from that little base. We built a secret base on top of a plateau, and then we essentially, within that 30 plus days, had a Death Star style base in the most resource-rich area of the map. We basically conquered server 438 to the point where it's like some of the folks that I happen to be the tribe leader at the time. I never really broadcast that because it doesn't matter. But at one point, dude, we essentially, some of my more bloodthirsty tribe mates would go around on raids, and it was like, guys, you got to lay off for a while. You're going to exterminate the ecosystem in the server. People would log in, like, is this a friendly server? And people would be like, yes. Wink, wink.
Well, what it sounds like to me is that regardless, it was fun, first of all. And but second of all, it sounds like human nature still sort of it came to working together. And sure, there was like a rivalry, and maybe the reason was that you guys are American and they were Chinese or whatever. But again, that seems like that is infinitely better than people actually starving in real life. Like, I don't understand why, we could have all that in video games, let people get their rage out in video games. And again, if people are becoming racist and stuff and using their dinosaurs to eat, lower level dinosaurs just to piss people off, it sounds like that person maybe has some issues that they need to work out in real life. So if we had, better lives, people would do that. And of course, people, sometimes I want to go on online games just to kill people. But again, I do that online. I don't do it in real life, I think that human nature is to work together.
Even within the game, it's and the whole point of that random spiel about dinosaurs and stuff like that was that I believe the story of humanity is to overcome, no matter what that is. And even within that game, once you basically are more or less one of, if not the tribe, kind of running the server there, at some point you just don't go around and just wiping out people that are just extremely low level. That seems just kind of like a dick move.
That's
what it would be is, if you at least let somebody get to a certain point where once they maybe have like starting building large metal structures, like, oh geez, maybe these people could actually be a threat. So at that point you actually need to expend resources. And I'll be straight up, there were a number of folks that we happened to raid at one point where they're just like, you realize at that point it's like, well, they've just kind of come to accept this, and it's like, oh, how are you guys doing? Well, we just want to do the dude. There were so many folks we'd start raiding that would literally just join us and stuff like that. That was literally how we conquered that server. But we would do battle with folks like even one of my hardcore teammates tried to gank me when I was a lower level. I'm like, oh my god, I'm just trying to run because I think they're much higher level, even though like I could have probably turned around and killed them because I put a lot into like health and stuff like that at the time. Then I ran into my base and there was a dinosaur there. I was like, whoa, let's not bring the dinos into. And it's like just the sheer fact, if you can talk and effectively communicate with somebody, dude, they don't need to be your enemy. If you can turn an enemy into a friend, man, dude, those are some very strong bonds and stuff. And that's why I'm like, I don't like a lot of the current meta, if you would, again, kind of going back where it's like, well, you need to put your proverbial boot on their throat and squeeze absolutely everything out of them. No. If I'm having a discussion with somebody, and even if I've kind of got them up against the quote unquote ropes, depending on whatever we're talking about, why would I try to squeeze and destroy a person where it's like, no. It's like at that point, it's kind of like sparring. Rather than trying to have a death match, if you're sparring with somebody and you knock your opponent down, you reach down, you offer them a hand up and stuff, and you show them that it's like there ain't no big thing here. It's like, yeah, we have a disagreement, but I'm still going to treat you like a human being and have a little dignity there. And I think human dignity is something that is very important that we've kind of lost in many ways.
Yeah, and I think that comes from capitalism's innately competitive and because the whole point is to buy out your competition and to destroy them and to hoard all the resources for yourself and keep them from other people. And if we just gave people enough resources to survive and let them sort of do what they wanted, that again, it would just it sounds like we agree that things would work out infinitely.
I think again, a lot of it comes down to the proper incentive structure as well, because ultimately, let's face it, in life at times, you're going to have to do things that you don't necessarily want to do. Now, those things might be very important to eat, whether it's helping yourself or those folks around you. And I'll give you an example, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think one of the most successful communes that exist in these United States are a lot of the Amish communities. I mean, am I wrong? I mean,
there's a lot of Christian anarchist communities in Europe too, and they do really well. They share everything, and they do great. And they basically what they do is they make clothes and sell them, and they all have houses. They all have like nice clothes. I mean, obviously they are religiously focused, but a lot of people who were not religious like join in just because it's like, I feel safe here. Like I feel I'm actually part of a community again. And I like. We've lost that, and I feel like we're very close to getting it back. And I think that we just need to give people methods on how to do it rather than just scare people, oh, the world's ending. I mean, if we just give people the opportunity to build communities, they will, and incentivize community over selfishness. It would make things good. And then of course, we can use video games to dominate people if that's what we want to do, right? I mean, again, we could have so many things if we loosened IP laws a little bit. We could have free Yu-Gi-Oh. We could do anything.
No, I got no problem like compensating people for good work and everything like that.
Of course, that's why I said social democracy is a great first step. We just need to get people out of the mindset that America is like the best because we had, a giant land with most resources that didn't even go in, like was completely fine during the First World War and then didn't even join the Second World War till it was almost over. And all of Europe was devastated. We were completely fine. And so we got tons of subsidies and everything. We
were in a very optimal position in order to help build a lot of Europe as well as.
And then we got a lot of money from that, right. And unfortunately, that kind of money has run out. But that mindset has stuck. So I think
we don't have a lot of it. sorry to cut you off, but we
No,
don't have a
go
lot of the explosive growth we had up through about the 70s and so, and a
Mhm.
lot of it seems to have come down to different accounting methods and financial instruments to kind of almost, and again, this is something I heard a bit more from kind of like Eric Weinstein and stuff like that. But I think there's a certain level of truth to this as well, in the sheer fact that so many of these different financial instruments, whether the derivatives that kind of led to like the housing crisis in 2008, where it's like, okay, what are we doing? It's like, okay, we're giving out loans. We want folks to have homes and stuff. Okay, that's a good thing. Now, what financial instruments are we giving them? Well, we're giving them 5-year adjustable rate mortgages that go from, I don't know, 3.5 to 4% up to like 15%. Where
Yeah.
also, why are we giving them this? Well, basically, we earn more money the larger the loan we give them. As somebody that spent about a decade in corporate sales, I'll be straight up, dude. There were points where it's like, all right, I could sell you the same roof and housing package for $25,000 or $20,000. The only difference is the size of my commission check. And when you
Yeah.
have incentives like that, it's like,
Mhm.
I realize what my incentives are and everything. Unfortunately, my incentives, as far as my bottom line and me potentially getting you the best value for your dollar, don't align.
Yeah, it's like, and that could be solved if we just alter the incentives from, again, make all the money, to give people the opportunity to be the best that they can. Like, if the more, I feel like the more democracy we add, the better, because people will
Could you give
be
me
like,
30 seconds real quick? I'll be
Go ahead.
right back.
I actually was thinking about wrapping it up pretty soon. I'll just let him go. The Southerner with ADHD on the YouTube comments, Christian democracy is a thing. Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I was talking about the Christian anarchist communes. I can show that real quick. A quick little taste of what they do is it's a is this the one? I can't seem to find it. It was a video on YouTube, but Christian Anarchy. Well, there's the ones in Taiwan, but I forget. It was in England, I thought. I don't know. I can't find it, but they were a thing. I mean, there's some in Indonesia, but I feel like people are less interested in that. I can post a link in the chat. But, yeah, so it sounds like Southern.
All right, my apologies. The human bladder only holds so much.
Yeah, well, actually, it's kind of unfortunate. I was saying I think we could kind of wrap it up if you want anyway.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, it's been great. We'll have to do it again, and I'll actually have to talk to you about some of the connections that you have, if you wouldn't mind, because I would be interested in maybe talking to some of those people too.
Yeah, no, totally. It's like I said, it's like I kind of find myself, like, this is why I say I'm a pathfinder, and that I basically travel around between so many different communities, and I try to listen, I try to learn, I try to provide input in generally kind of a bit more of a reasonable way, at least in my mind. I like to think of just kind of providing an additional perspective rather than just screaming at a person and telling them that they're wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, think of how many more people would be better off if they could travel, because they had the financial security to do that and to take, a couple weeks off or even a few months off. Imagine if everybody had the opportunity to travel the world. Like a lot of religious communities, like the Jewish community has Birthright, and I think that there's also the Muslim one where they go to Mecca, where those are religious pilgrimages. But think about what if, like, as a society, we required everybody after high school to go for like a couple months to just travel the world and then come back. Like how much better would the world be if we could do that?
I think getting around and seeing a lot of the world helps open up a whole bunch of different perspectives. I mean, I was personally just talking about traveling around to different corners of the internet, but I mean, dude, if we could actually world travel and not have to worry about like this pandemic and everything, I think that would help make the world a better place. Totally.
I agree. So, all right, this has been Memes of Destruction. Do you have anything you'd like to plug? I imagine most of the people watching this were your fans anyway, but by all means.
Oh, no worries. If anybody cares to check out what I do in this internet stuff and things, you can find me on the YouTubes at The Memes of Destruction or on the Twitters at Meme Destruction.
I will link both of those in the comments for you too. So
much appreciated. Thank you for having me on.
All right. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Peace out.